Hi, everybody. I'm Pamela D Wilson. This is the home stretch. Congratulations, you have made it this far. We're in the home stretch for how to get guardianship of a parent. What on earth does a guardian do? And what are the responsibilities of a guardian? Now, I know that we've talked about this a little bit in the prior webinars, but we'll go into a little more detail about the legal responsibilities of a guardian, and even more into communication with healthcare providers, conflicts of interest, and using your parents' estate money wisely. So let's get started. As we've discussed, this is a bit of a recap, but a guardian has a very high level of responsibility for the care of a vulnerable person, your elderly parent, who really can't make decisions for him or herself. We've also talked about this. Everything that you do is subject to scrutiny by other people. I used to tell my staff, don't do anything that you wouldn't want to have appear on the front page of the newspaper, and be proud that it was there, not be worried that it was there. The acts of guardians all over the United States, both family guardians and professional guardians, are under a lot of scrutiny. Family guardians many times object to the appointment of professionals. They can make the lives of professionals very difficult, as can your family members who object to your appointment. They can be like a thorn in your side. They can cause a lot of problems if you're not acting in a responsible role for your parents and making good decisions. So very important. Know your state laws and the guardianship laws in your state. The people at the probate desk can be your very best friend. File your reports on time. Provide your guardian letter to anyone who needs it in the healthcare system. Make sure that you understand if you have to request court approval to do anything, like move an elderly parent, sell a home. Make sure that you understand what that entails and you do it in a timely manner. And most of all, if you are also not the financial person, whatever term that is, conservator, guardian of materials, guardian of property, if you're not that person as a family caregiver, establish a very close relationship with that person, because any actions that you take, any care that you schedule has a cost. You have to make sure that there's enough money to pay for it, and you're trying to make your parents' money last as long as possible. We'll talk in a minute about applying for public benefits, which can eventually happen if your parent outlives their money and their resources. Most importantly, as a guardian, you have a duty to seek assistance, and this means most of all to educate yourself. You can use your guardianship estate funds to pay for you to take a class, to pay for you to hire people to help you. Because as a guardian, if you already haven't realized this based on all of the stories I've shared, you're going to make the most difficult decisions of your life. You're going to make decisions that you never had to make. You are going to make life and death decisions. A couple of items on that topic. In this caregiver online course, there is a video that I highly suggest you watch. It's called Eat Cookies, and it is the story of David Drummond, a young man who had a tragic accident and had to make very serious life or death decisions about his own life. The first time that I had to do this, it was with a client that I actually volunteered to accept. I got a call over Christmas, and it was from a hospital here in Denver. And the care manager said, "Oh, Pamela, we have a client. He has no money. We haven't been able to find anybody to accept his case. He is a quadriplegic. He is paralyzed from the neck down. Will you accept his case?" Now, always before accepting a case, I always meant to meet the person. So I went down to the hospital and I met the client and immediately fell in love, and I accepted his case. His name was Dale. And over a period of the year, Dale's health got better and it got worse. But by the end of about a year, it was so poor that I had to make some serious decisions. He was on a feeding tube because he couldn't swallow. And if you have any experience with feeding tubes, they can be very beneficial for people who can't swallow, but they also can cause a lot of problems. For example, aspiration pneumonia, because fluid is breathed into the lungs. Well, Dale started having aspiration pneumonia frequently, and he had to go in and have his lungs suctioned. And that's it's a traumatic experience for the person and for the people who are doing it. And the doctor eventually said, Pamela, this is not going to get better. It's time for you to make a decision. The decision that I had to make was basically to not send Dale to the hospital again, but to put him on hospice and comfort care, because we knew that his lungs eventually were going to become clogged and that would end his life. And I had to think about this for 3 days. And as a caregiver for Dale, as his guardian, I went through a lot of guilt, as you will do if you are ever in this role for a parent. A lot of guilt over, oh my gosh, I'm ending a life. I'm killing this person. Do I even have the right to do this? Oh my gosh, what would this person think? Would this be what they wanted? I mean, I went through an emotional tug of war, and I eventually decided to put him on hospice and end his life. Now, the other corresponding thing that was happening at this same time was Dale didn't have any money. All he had was his monthly Social Security check that went directly to the nursing home that he was living in. And during this time, I was filing to be his representative payee so that I could control that money, because once a person dies, the money stops. There's no control. The guardian has no control over money unless that guardian is also the conservator or the personal representative of the estate. Dale didn't need a will. He didn't have a will because he had nothing. But I wanted to make sure that the nursing home got paid for at least the time while Dale was living, in the event that something happened. And so I had to make the decision about hospice. I was hoping that this representative payee would come through, and God bless Dale. One day before Dale passed away, that representative payee was approved so that I could take all of the money in Dale's bank account and pay the nursing home the money that they were due. And then Dale passed away. So, and I also prepaid for Dale's cremation so that I could bury Dale somewhere. So, long story short, accepted Dale's case gratis, never got paid a penny. It was one of the most amazing experiences of my life. Also, one of the most difficult decisions I had to make to end someone's life. And it was an amazing experience. I ended up scattering Dale's ashes in a beautiful place here in Colorado that I drive by frequently, so I can still say hello to Dale and thank him for the opportunity to be of service. So as a guardian, these are decisions that you are going to have to make. And long after Dale, I had to make life and death decisions for many of the clients for whom I was guardian for, because many of these people are elderly like your parents. The only way out, unfortunately, is death. None of us get out of here alive, which is why it's so important to make sure that the right guardian is chosen, that you understand all of the wishes of the person that you're caring for so that you can implement them and make the difficult decisions when the time comes. So other things that are on this slide, again, you create the initial and the ongoing guardian report. You commit to ongoing education. You manage care within financial constraints. You learn about public benefits so that you know what to do when your parent runs out of money. And in a perfect world, you're planning that a year, if not more, in advance, because there are a lot of things that you can run into. And then you implement and monitor that care plan. So I want to talk about family visits and interaction, because this can be a huge issue with guardianship, especially today with divorces and blended families and stepmothers and stepfathers and stepchildren and stepbrothers and sisters and everything else that's out there. So this is a true story. So I don't know if you remember the gentleman in this slide, but this is an actor. His name is Peter Falk. He was in the crime series Columbo, and you see him scratching his head. Amazing detective. He would be solving crimes. And usually before he left someone that he was interrogating, he'd scratch his head like that, say, just one more question. And he'd ask the question, and it was always that question that solved the crime. But Peter Falk didn't plan appropriately for his later years. He was diagnosed with dementia. He didn't have any stipulations in his legal documents about family visitation, and he was divorced and remarried. So his daughter, Catherine Falk, wanted to go see her father, as one normally would. And her stepmother said, "Oh, no. Your father doesn't want to see you. I'm in control. You can't come visit your father." Catherine Falk was shocked. She was appalled, but she didn't give up. She did an amazing thing. She has a website today. It's on this slide. It's the CatherineFalkOrganization.org, but she got a bill passed called the Peter Falk Law. And it's not passed in all states right now. You can go to her website and see which states it's passed in. But that law supports family visitation of parents if you are a child, because that relationship, as I've said before in this webinar, existed at birth. It's not like someone can say, "You're not the child. You can't visit." You have a right to go visit your elderly parent who may be under a guardianship or a medical power of attorney. You have that right. And in the summary for this program, I share other stories about celebrities, Glenn Campbell being one of them, who was under a similar situation. And I share these so that you realize that not planning for this stuff is more common than anyone would ever expect. You would expect celebrities to have estate plans, to have provisions for guardianship and power of attorney and who they want to visit. Celebrities don't even plan for this. None of us expect to ever be in this position throughout our life. We're all young. We're going to live together. We're going to live healthy. We're going to live forever. We're never going to have health issues. Unfortunately, that's unrealistic thinking that we don't want to talk about, which is so important that we talk about it today. So in the summary section for this webinar, again, there will be some stories about celebrities like Peter Falk who were in these situations so that you can learn from them. And I'll also share another video about what to do if you have gone through this course and you don't feel like any of this is going to work for you. What do you do next? Let's talk a little bit more about daily living environment. So as a guardian, you are responsible for the daily living environment of your parent, regardless of whether they are still living at home, regardless of whether someone's living with them, like one of your brothers and sisters. You're responsible for their living environment if they live in a care community, independent living, assisted living, memory care, a nursing home. You have a responsibility to visit and oversee that care. Now, let me share a true story, another guardianship story of mine, about how these situations can be complicated by your family members. True story, my client's name is Marion. Marion lived with one of her daughters, or I should say, one of her daughters lived in Marion's home. Marion had dementia, and one of her daughters, she had 3, filed a petition for guardianship to have me appointed. Now, of the 3 daughters, the person who filed the petition was the most involved. She was the most reasonable. She was the medical durable power of attorney. Another sister who lived out of town was somewhat involved and kind of the middle sister. So wasn't opposed to guardian, but wasn't really sure if she totally supported it, but she didn't contest it. The last daughter who lived in Marion's home didn't contest the guardianship either, but she had a need to live in Marion's home to have her living expenses reduced. So it's basically free rent. That daughter had mental health issues. And Marion, in a sense, enabled that daughter all of her life to never get a job, to live in the basement, to be cared for, to expect to be cared for. How many of you have brothers and sisters in your family that can't take care of themselves? How many of you have brothers and sisters that your parents enabled never to do anything? They needed money, your parents gave them money. They needed a place to live, they moved into your parents' basement. These situations are more common than anyone would expect. The issue that I had as a guardian for this woman was that she had a daughter that was living with her who was mentally ill and who was also abusive. Because that daughter wasn't providing care like she had agreed to, I had to petition the court to move Marion out of the home. But I just couldn't do that. I needed substantiation of the abuse and of the neglect to be able to do that. So how did I do that? Believe it or not, I had to do this in many cases where I was a guardian. You have to prove things. I hired caregivers to go into the home several times a day to make sure that Marion had her medications and her meals, and to notice what was happening the other times that the caregivers weren't there. There were other times a day where Marion should have been reminded to take medications. There were other times a day where Marion should have been fed or should have had other care provided to her. And these caregivers over time were able to prove that the daughter was neglecting Marion's care. If the caregivers weren't there, Marion wasn't fed. Marion was starving when the caregivers got there. The medication boxes that were set out by a nurse were all mixed up. Marion couldn't do that. They were hidden. The daughter was not giving Marion medications that she didn't think Marion should take. The daughter was messing up the boxes. It caused extra expense to Marion for us to have to go in and set up those boxes correctly. So over a period of time, and it took several months, I was able to prove that this was not a good situation for Marion. The problem, though, was that Marion enabled her daughter to do this for years, 20, 30, 40 years. That daughter never moved out of the house after high school. So how likely do you think that Marion was to say, I want to move out of this house. I want to go somewhere else. My daughter's going to have to live somewhere else. She's going to have to get a job. She's going to have to take care of herself. How difficult do you think that would be for Marion's daughter after all these years? Needless to say, no surprise, Marion was against moving, but I went to a court hearing. I presented evidence. All the daughters, all the interested parties had the opportunity to object. I had to go to the extent of getting a court order to move Marion. And that included having policemen at the house, making arrangements with a transport system to pick Marion up and take her to the new community. On the day of the move, it was a 6-hour ordeal. Marion's daughter not answering the door because she knew we were showing up. Marion saying, I don't want to move. The police and the transport having to escort Marion out of her house. Truly one of the worst guardian situations I have ever been in. I've been in a lot of difficult ones, but that day was a particularly difficult day for me, even though I accomplished the move. Now, the good news is Marion liked the community that she moved to. She did well. Her health improved. She got the right medications. She was able to eat. She did a lot of things that she wanted to enjoy, not being under the control of that daughter. These are situations that you may face with your family members once you become guardian. You may not realize this, but this is the role of a guardian. These are the responsibilities of a guardian, to do those right things that honestly you would rather not do, but you have a duty to do. Let's talk about confidentiality. As a guardian, you have a responsibility to keep your parents' information confidential. You can give it out to healthcare providers and people, but friends and nosy people don't need to have all the details of what's going on with your parent. You also have a duty to create a file that has all of your parents' information, so copies of identification, legal documents, insurance cards. You have a duty to collect information, and that is information mostly from healthcare providers. You go to a doctor appointment, you want the visit notes. Your parent goes to the hospital, you want all of those hospital notes. And you might think initially, well, why do I need all this paperwork? Well, you need it because when the care of your parent increases, when their health decreases, you may have to go back and look at what medication was given. You may think, did that medication cause a problem? What happened that day? I can't remember. Your memory is in those documents that you collect, and they come in very handy when you have to make snap decisions about medications and treatment and surgeries at the last minute. You also should keep notes about contact with all of the providers, what they did, what they followed up to do. Again, you want to make sure you're getting ongoing evaluations of memory loss, because you never know when something's going to happen in your family and you will need that information. Personal contact. Do you have to visit every month? If you can't visit every month, you may be able to hire a local care manager or a fiduciary to visit for you and to document those visits. Those visits have to be documented in your annual Guardian report. Again, what's going on with your parent, changes in health, providers that are helping. You have to maintain ongoing contact with all of the care agencies that you use. You have to supervise and make sure they're doing a good job. You have to document all that contact. So being a guardian, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of responsibility. Make sure that you're up for this, or that you have the ability to hire the help that you need to make sure that you are fulfilling your responsibilities. Advocate for medical care. We've talked about this with all of my client stories. You cannot be a staunch enough advocate. You have to know what's going on, approve medications, approve treatments, attend medical appointments with your parents, know about diagnosis, know the effects of medications, be the expert on everything health related to your parent. If necessary, you obtain second opinions. You want to be able to monitor changes in conditions or know when something is wrong with your parent. So for example, all of my clients who lived in care communities, I had a list that I created that said, if they don't get out of bed in the morning, I want you to call me. If they have a temperature, their blood pressure drops. Under all of these circumstances, you call me. As a guardian, you want to be able to identify changes in condition and warning signs of changes in condition. So when I had my clients and they were in care communities, I created a checkoff list that said, my client doesn't get out of bed in the morning, I want to know. If they refuse breakfast, I want you to call me. Under all of these circumstances, I want you to call me. If this happens, you call 911 and then you call me. I want you to monitor their temperature, their blood pressure, how much they drink, how much they sleep every day. So I created a list of changes in condition that meant that my client was experiencing a change such that it might require a trip to the doctor or a trip to the hospital emergency room. So let's talk about recognizing and avoiding conflict of interest as a guardian. This is an extremely important subject, and you may not even realize the importance. So as a guardian, you have the right to pay yourself, but you cannot pay yourself for services that other people can or should provide. You can't be that 24-hour caregiver for your parent and pay yourself. You can't hire a friend to do something for your parent. You have to disclose anything that could appear that you are unwisely benefiting from the care of your elderly parent. Now, what you can do is you can petition the court for permission to hire a family member or hire a friend to do certain things, but you have to do that and get the approval before those actions actually happen. So you'll see on this slide things that you can and cannot do, or things that would be suspicious to others. Again, if you don't want it on the front page of the newspaper, you probably shouldn't do it. If you can't explain it to other people, the benefits, why you're doing it, you probably shouldn't do it. Take this very seriously. It can cause a lot of problems. Full disclosure and scrutiny, we have talked about this multiple times. Anybody can ask questions about why you're doing something. They can question your decision. They can take you back to court to prove that you're not doing your job. Your family members who disagree with you can cause a lot of problems that can cause your parents costs and more money. You want to avoid those if at all possible. Know what you are doing in your care plan. Know what reports you have to file to the court. Know what you have to get approval, pre-approval from the court for before you do it. If you act in a very responsible manner, more than likely you're not going to run into any of these issues. But again, I don't want you to be that person that said, oh, I took that webinar from Pamela D Wilson and she didn't tell me this. I'm telling you everything and more so that you know what can happen and you know what to expect. Last but not least, you have to spend your parents wisely, their money wisely for their care. You have to plan for their care. You want to plan if your parents are going to run out of money. Plan at least 2 years, a year, 6 months if you can, because you'll have to get them on public benefits, on Medicaid, on state programs. And that doesn't happen overnight. Paperwork can take a long time. Availability to get your parents into a care community can take a long time. Finding the right place can take a long time. It can take months. Getting your applications approved can take months. Your goal in caring for your parent is not necessarily to preserve or save money for an inheritance for you or your brothers and sisters. In a perfect world, you spend all of your parents' money and they pass away and they don't have to go on public benefits, or you're very, very close. That is a perfect situation. But you are not to not provide care for your parents because you're worried about retaining money back. Your goal is to give your elderly parents the best care you possibly can, the best quality of life, the best of everything, because that's your responsibility as a guardian. And it's your responsibility to your family to do the right thing. I'm Pamela D Wilson. This is a summary of the fact that being a guardian is not for everyone. A guardian appointment can permanently damage your family relationships. As a guardian, I was not always liked by the family of the persons for whom I was appointed, but I had to do the best to support those family relationships and to get along with everyone. That is your responsibility as a family guardian. It can be a difficult situation, especially if you are very emotionally invested. Make sure that if you are accepting this guardianship appointment, you are prepared from an emotional standpoint about all of the things that you have to do, all of the decisions that you have to make, and that you're in this for the long run. Also make sure that a potential successor is appointed, so if something happens to you, you're killed in a car accident, your health declines, you realize that you can't do this anymore, you don't have to go back to court to have a successor appointed. You just file a successor petition. Thank you for being here for this course. I appreciate your time. I appreciate the dedication that you have and the interest that you have in being a guardian for an elderly parent. I hope that this course gives you a path forward to petition for guardianship, to have that guardianship petition succeed, most of all to save you money. Hopefully you can go through this process without hiring an attorney, or if you do have to hire an attorney, at least you know more about that process and all of the things that you can do to save time and money. I'm Pamela D Wilson. My website is on here. The website where you can find additional programs is here. Stay tuned for the summary video for this course and the additional section that has a lot of public guardianship cases that you have the opportunity to learn for. Thank you for joining me for this course. I hope to see you in another course on my website. Have a fabulous day today. God bless you all.